I, Thoth the Atlantean, master of mysteries, keeper of records, mighty king, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass into the halls of Amenti, set down for the guidance of those that are to come after, these records of the mighty wisdom of great Atlantis. In the great city of Keo on the island of Undal, in a time far past, I began this incarnation. Not as the little men of the present age did the mighty ones of Atlantis live and die, but rather from aeon to aeon did they renew their life in the halls of Amenti, where the river of life flows eternally onward. 100 times 10 have I descended the dark way that led into light, and as many times have I ascended from the darkness into the light, my strength and power renewed. Now for a time I descend, and the men of Kem shall know me no more. But in a time yet unborn will I rise again, mighty and potent, requiring an accounting of those left behind me. Then beware, O men of Kem, if ye have falsely betrayed my teaching, for I shall cast ye down from your high estate into the darkness of the caves from whence ye came. Betray not my secrets to the men of the north or the men of the south, lest my curse fall upon ye. Remember and heed my words, for surely I will return again, and require of thee that which ye guard. Aye, even from beyond time and from beyond death will I return. Seen through alien eyes, humans may appear to be controversial, incomprehensible, lacking long-term memory. The ancestors of modern men fully understood that the fragile memory should be kept in something more resistant than the mind of the individual, or on simple pages. Immortality, reincarnation, infinity, concepts in stark contrast to the human dimension, were probably the thoughts that the ancient Egyptians addressed to the immensity of the celestial vault while gazing at it. These ancestors of ours observed space and nature for millennia, loving life and reality so much that they wanted to imprint the concepts on stone in a continuous metamorphosis of temples and stories. We are the memory, and the important things had to be remembered by everyone. But as strange as it is to imagine that the arid territories of Egypt in the past could have been flourishing and green spaces, it must be remembered that everything was originally submerged, first by ice and then by water. So the conformation of the Earth's surface must have been something very distant from that which we know now. We have traces of these hypotheses in our ancestral memory when we mention the city of Atlantis. Its origin, where it could be, or how the ancients managed to remember its existence is not clear. The legend of Atlantis comes to us thanks to the Greeks. We start talking about it in 360 BC through the dialogue of Timaeus and Critias, where Plato states, "There was an island situated in front of the straits which are by you called the Pillars of Heracles. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the way to other islands, and from these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent, which surrounded the true ocean. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea." Following these events, everything changed. A long time later, the isolated lands, limited by the flow of the tides, were transformed into large territories, and when man found the glory of the Egyptian territory along his path, he stopped there, letting himself be subjugated by its natural strength. For over 5 millennia, a great civilization, seemingly connected to the kingdom of heaven, ruled on the banks of the great river Iteru, known today as the Nile. Deeply linked to water, the ancient Egyptian civilization was born from a spark that flared up over time along that immense life-bearing water artery, and it was thanks to this river, which cyclically flooded its banks, that the impression was created among people that it was necessary to establish the order of time, to recognize and predict when the episodes from the past could occur, repeatedly, leading to the construction of a calendar divided into 3 seasons: floodwaters, plant growth, and harvest, leading to understanding that the rotation of the Earth around the Sun could last 360 days, plus 5 days called epagomena. Of these 5 days, the Egyptians wrote a myth, which comes to us only through the story of Plutarch, a Greek philosopher who lived under the Roman Empire. According to Plutarch, a mysterious god Thoth, guardian of knowledge, managed to obtain these 5 days by playing and winning a game of senet, an ancestor of the better-known game of backgammon, against Khonshu, the god of the moon. The sun, more commonly known as the god Ra, had forbidden children to be born from the union of Nut, goddess of the sky, and Geb, god of the earth. By adding these 5 days, however, Thoth would have given the goddess Nut the possibility of conceiving 5 deities: Osiris, the inventor of agriculture; Horus, symbol of protection and strength; Seth, god of storms and disorder and chaos; Isis, goddess of life; and Nephthys, goddess of the underworld and protector of mummies. Although to our eyes these figures seem only the characters of a mythical story for adults and children, often represented by majestic and at the same time terrifying beings, they were fundamental for the formation of new concepts and ideas. In fact, the gods synthetically enclosed unique signifiers with multiple meanings, becoming the binder of civilization. Through and around them, communication was established, the evolution of the logos, the birth of different archetypes from which our own civilization, throughout history, has profoundly drawn. But the path to get there was far from simple. In the beginning, in the known world, there were simple communities of nomads who wandered through a hostile nature, where only the primordial law of the strongest was in force. These living beings, forced to impose themselves on each other, tried to perpetrate a constant life cycle, not becoming food for vultures or any other predator. Nature remained hostile until it was understood how it worked, and that it was necessary to remain united in order not to disappear in the face of its strength. As well as natural mysteries, it was found necessary to remember, century after century, laws and rules. Men and women came together to defeat the fear of loneliness and death, finding a promised land beneath their feet. Crossed by the roaring currents that headed towards the north of a continent that would become the cradle of human civilization over the millennia, Egypt became the place where men decided to lay a principle of civilization. To mix and discuss things, but not only for the people, above all for those whose path had been chosen by destiny. The scribes, let's not forget, were a caste. The long process of integration and territorial wealth led to the assimilation of neighbouring and then distant civilizations. While the amber sands flowed incessantly within the hourglass of time, the small settlements became villages, the villages large cities, and later capitals of kingdoms were erected that through long struggles, civil wars and political agreements transformed themselves, unifying into one unitary state under the dominance of the king pharaohs, giving rise to a society rich in knowledge, but above all in systems that were useful for controlling an empire. Too often, ancient Egypt is associated only with the pyramids of Giza. Too often we forget that in addition to these impressive monuments, which are only theoretically funereal, this territory, over time, has given us much more through its high level of development, knowledge, and the richness of the skills of its people. A population so ancient as to leave us only a hypothetical idea of its origins, given that the Egyptians are believed to have been aware of, and in some cases, the direct descendants of the children of Atlantis. And here the logos, the subtle link between thought and word, assumed a fundamental importance through the representation of sacred figures and a linguistic code. Throughout Egyptian history, the scribes produced an incredible volume of stories, mathematical writings, medical manuals, legends, and religious texts for humanity, which today, even more than ever, thanks to new studies on their writing, can be understood and analysed, thus bringing to light the different facets of the Iteru River people. It took 300 years after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone to be able to translate these ancient finds. The text of the artifact contains a decree issued by the priests of Memphis informing of the suppression of certain types of taxes and the construction of temples and statues dedicated to the pharaoh Ptolemy V Epiphanes. It was originally written in 3 languages: Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic Egyptian, and Ancient Greek. This artifact, discovered in 1799 by Pierre-François Bouchard, captain in Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign, is just one of the demonstrations of how advanced and skilled these people were in terms of communication. Writing became essential for the strengthening of the kingdom because, like any other majestic civilization of the past, the Egyptians also based their society and political structure on a pillar: religion. The fulcrum of the activities was the Egyptian polytheistic religion, formed by the gods, in the ancient language Neteru, who symbolize the multiplicity and the contrasting forces of life, the functions of nature through which creation came into being and is maintained. The religious system was formed by a conglomerate of anthropomorphic and zoomorphic divinities. There were over 1,500 divine figures who showed themselves to the people through the intermediation of the pharaohs, believed to possess divine abilities by virtue of their positions of power and control. In all of this, Egyptian theological philosophy carried within itself a main foundation. The gods had to be supported through rituals and offerings so that they could maintain the Mat, or the order of the cosmos, and reject the Isfet, chaos, concepts that were also represented by respective divine figures. To fund this system, the state devoted enormous resources to religious rites, places where worship could be practiced for the enrichment of knowledge, effective methods aimed at fortifying the union of great glory. Glory that saw a repeated assimilation of nomadic cultures coming mainly from Mesopotamia, thus generating a continuous metamorphosis of the gods. Some of these sacred figures were a mix of territorial endemic divinities, as well as of more ancient and distant civilizations than the Egyptian one, and most likely it was for this reason that the gods created in Egypt had to favour the Mat and confine the Isfet. The ancient Egyptians knew very well that if the positive but also negative characteristics of the gods had been kept in mind, the people would have remembered the power of the divine, and consequently they would have been assimilated into society with more dexterity. The sacred of the past could not be cancelled, but rather reorganized to be perpetrated, understood, and loved also by those coming from other parts of the territory, so they could recognize the qualities of the gods of Egypt as if they were those of their land of origin. The fate of the ancient polytheistic religion, originating from the ancient territories of Mesopotamia and formed by gods with dual characteristics, more simply defined today with good and evil, had to continue its path, at least until the birth of the antithesis of the polytheistic religion, the birth of monotheistic Christianity derived from Jewish culture, where the concepts of good and evil were represented by distinct and simple figures, such as angels and demons, figures of a profound conceptual stereotype, a fraction of what surrounds and makes up the individual. A clear example of this assimilation is the figure of Ishtar, derived from the homologous goddess Inanna, whose name carries the meaning Lady of Heaven or Splendor, and also known by the name of Astarte by the Phoenicians and Canaanites. Inanna was the Sumerian goddess of fertility, beauty and love, understood as an erotic rather than conjugal figure, and was also assimilated to the Akkadian, then Babylonian and Assyrian goddess called Ishtar. Although these goddesses have different names, they have very similar characteristics to each other and were some of the most important Mesopotamian female deities. They, as well as all the Egyptian gods, represented both the positive and the negative, with a double facet: love and war, the cyclical regulation of a generous and also destructive nature, but also justice and agriculture. The dualistic nature of the gentle and murderous rain goddesses make them some of the most interesting figures in archaic mythology to this day. In Egypt, the figures of Ishtar, Inanna and Astarte, who appeared in the territory in totally different historical periods, were reintegrated into the Egyptian religion with the triad Isis, Sekhmet and Hathor, while later, in the course of more recent Jewish culture, influenced by the Canaanite peoples, also known as the peoples of Lebanon, Palestine and parts of Syria and Jordan, the figure of Astarte was totally eradicated, as it was considered abominable and in stark contrast to God. The numerous myths concerning Ishtar are often at odds with each other. In some tales, she is the daughter of Sin, god of the moon, and sister of Shamash, god of the sun, while in others she is described as the daughter of Anu, god of the sky. In each version, however, Ishtar is described as sister of Ereshkigal, lady of the great land, and her counterpart. She is, in short, one of the many figures that embody the creation of life. In all the stories, however, the association of the goddess with the planet Venus is maintained, which led her to have the title of Lady of the Resplendent Light. The iconography of the goddess is also associated with the eight-pointed star, a symbol also found in Catholic iconography related to the Virgin Mary. The symbol of the eight-pointed star evokes the fact that the planet Venus retraces the same phases in correspondence with an 8-year Earth cycle, something already widely known to Sumerian astronomers and astrologers. This is just one of the many demonstrations of how much the writings and sacred religious figures during the course of human memory may have been altered under the guise of time, and it is from here that another detail also emerges. Among the gods of Kem or ancient Egypt, there is one, the most revered, and depicted as a witness of the life of the pharaohs, which was never previously mentioned or described by other cultures. This is the figure of Thoth, guardian of wisdom, magic, measurement of time, mathematics and geometry, protector of scribes, and he who brought the knowledge of writing to mortals. Thoth, zoomorphic entity, celestial god, who in art was often depicted with the head of an ibis, probably because the curve of its beak recalled the segment of the crescent moon of the Mesopotamian peoples, and which during its primordial evolution was also depicted as a baboon holding a crescent moon in its hands. The choice of these identifications was probably dictated by the behavior of these two animals, which appeared to the human eye as intelligent beings, methodical and shrewd observers. The figure of Thoth was born in Lower Egypt during the pre-dynastic period, 3900 to 3150 BC, and was mostly worshipped in Kemno, or Hermopolis, starting from 2000 BC. In Egyptian writing, the original name of the city of Hermopolis or Kemno means City of Eight, a number that nowadays is recognized as the number representing infinity, if placed horizontally or lying down. Hermopolis is the name attributed by Greek historians as an Egyptian locality devoted to Thoth, as he is also identified with the name of Hermes by the Greeks and Hermes Trismegistus by the Romans. This place was also the seat of the figure of the god Khnum, protector of the sources of the Nile, generator of the creative power of the floods. Hermopolis, capital of the 15th district of Upper Egypt, was built on the western bank of the Nile, in the heart of the Egyptian territory. It underwent great development in the pharaonic era and in the Hellenistic and Roman periods, until its destruction in the 5th century AD. Here Thoth assumed a role of great importance, and was considered one of the creator deities of the world, being associated with the symbol of the dead sun, as the moon itself rarely appears in Egyptian theology, probably too sacred to be depicted with its direct god of reference, Khonshu. While the figure of Ra, god of the midday sun, and Aten, understood as a life-generating force created through his golden rays, are very often depicted. Akhenaten, in his hymn to Aten, says something surprising about this figure, as if the Egyptians had understood that life is possible on other planets thanks to the power of some distant star. You rise in perfection on the horizon of the sky, living Aten, who started life. Whenever you are risen upon the eastern horizon, you fill every land with your perfection. You are appealing, great sparkling, high over every land. Hermopolis was connected to the ancient Egyptian myths of creation and the 8 deities of the Ogdoad, which are said to have existed even before the birth of the world. Seen today, they possessed quite alien characteristics, and had the task of personifying the primeval forces of chaos, called He, which possessed precise, equal and opposing forces, but which were harmoniously united. On this basis, the primitive divinities were thus formed by couples, where the male essence was opposed by the female one, called Paredra, and they were Nun and Nunet, the primordial waters, Kuk and Keket, darkness, Hu and Huhet, boundlessness and temporal infinity, Amon and Amonet, invisibility. These anthropomorphic deities, with the head of a frog for males and a snake for females, were the symbol of the waters from which they had emerged. Faced with this information, it is also possible that the animal linked to original Christian sin, the snake, is a figure derived precisely from Egyptian culture. A fundamental detail that then links the Christian religion and the ancient Israeli religion with the Egyptian one, and in the more specific case with Hermopolis, could be precisely the imaginary of the Garden of Eden. As if over time, the needs inherent in the monotheistic religion had led to a manipulation of the information belonging to the most ancient religions, in order to lose the origins of the place where they were conceived. One of the legends of the ancient city of Hermopolis narrates that the gods of Ogdoad, alongside the Nile, generated a primordial mud hill called the Isle of Flames or Isle of Knives. Here, in a mysterious way, the gods gave life to the sun, and according to the Hermopolitan clergy, the 8 deities who resided in chaos, who, in addition to creating other gods, also had the task of allowing the sun to rise daily, protecting it from darkness in the afterlife during the night. In Hermopolis, the Ogdoad and the cycles of the sun depended above all on the god Thoth, who every night placed the sleeping star on the hill, also better known as the moon, and it is for this reason that he was associated with the rebirth of the cycles, since the moon, simply by commanding the flow of water, regulates the cycles of every living being. The Egyptians already knew this fact very well, and the moon was not seen just as a supplier of night light or the star capable of measuring time without the sun. Its phases were given significant importance in astrology and astronomy, mainly due to the fundamental role that agriculture played, until it became the cornerstone on which most of the rituals were founded. Thus, over time, Thoth became not only the spokesman of rebirth, but also of immortality, representing in detail a sort of pre-absolute, a 0 point from where everything began, a shape-shifting celestial being, able to reincarnate, travel through space, and defeat the power of time. But his mystery remains, and what we know is very little, since over the centuries, just as religion has undergone changes, even the legends attributed to gods contain information manipulated by the personal ideas of authors, or probably by groups of authors. There is also the key role of semantics. Words take on different meanings, more or less important, based on the language in which they are pronounced, and these meanings can be understood differently from person to person. In recent centuries, there have been several attempts to bring to light the truth about the history of God, to the point of attributing hidden esoteric powers to his figure and developing an infinite number of theories. The multitude of writings make us lose track of any plausible confirmation, to such an extent that determining what is true and what is not becomes very difficult. Starting from one of the most recent texts, written by Maurice Doreal in 1930, it becomes clear that the fusion between the evolution of historical knowledge and the mythology of the past has given birth to one of the more spiritual versions regarding God. It is not clear whether this text was the result of imagination, or of the translation of the original writings, or of an in-depth knowledge of religion and theories concerning Egypt, or a piece of automatic writing caused by a transcendental contact with the Spirit of God. However, Doreal brings out a surprising version of the mythological figure and reports that Thoth was not only a being so ancient as to have seen the origin of Atlantis and so powerful as to bend space-time, but that to all those who fully understand the meaning of the texts, it would be possible to live forever, understand the natural order of the cosmos, dominate time, and travel through it. In addition to this, in the text, what Doreal defines as the children of the light stands out, who would appear not to be spirits at all, but something very similar to aliens, and another god even more absolute than Thoth himself, the inhabitant of the temple. Then we read about a technology never seen before by the men of Chem or ancient Egypt, a technology by which the pyramids themselves would be the mechanism, and a fact is quite markedly underlined. The real adventure for this ancient people began from the end of everything. In the first chapter of Doreal's Emerald Tablets, it states, "Great were my people in the ancient days, great beyond the conception of the little people now around me. Knowing the wisdom of old, seeking far within the heart of infinity, knowledge that belonged to earth's youth. Wise were we with the wisdom of the children of light who dwelt among us. Strong were we with the power drawn from the eternal fire. And of all these, greatest among the children of men was my father, Thot, keeper of the great temple, link between the children of light who dwelt within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands. Mouthpiece, after the 3, of the dweller of Unal, speaking to the kings with the voice that must be obeyed. Grew I there from a child into manhood, being taught by my father the elder mysteries, until in time there grew within the fire of wisdom, until it burst into a consuming flame. Naught desired I but the attainment of wisdom, until on a great day the command came from the dweller of the temple that I be brought before him. Few there were among the children of men who had looked upon that mighty face and lived, for not as the sons of men are the children of light when they are not incarnate in a physical body. Chosen was I from the sons of men, taught by the dweller so that his purposes might be fulfilled, purposes yet unborn in the womb of time. Long ages I dwelt in the temple, learning ever and yet ever more wisdom, until I, too, approached the light emitted from the great fire. Taught me he the path to Amenti, the underworld where the great king sits upon his throne of might. Deep I bowed in homage before the lords of life and the lords of death, receiving as my gift the key of life. Free was I of the halls of Amenti, bound not by death to the circle of life. Far to the stars I journeyed, until space and time became as naught. Then, having drunk deep of the cup of wisdom, I looked into the hearts of men, and there found I greater mysteries, and was glad, for only in the search for truth could my soul be stilled and the flame within be quenched. Down through the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste of the cup of death and return again in the light of life. Gradually, from the kingdoms of Atlantis, passed waves of consciousness that had been one with me, only to be replaced by spawn of a lower star. In obedience to the law, the word of the Master grew into flower. Downward into darkness turned the thoughts of the Atlanteans, until at last in his wrath arose from his Aguanthi, the dweller, speaking the word, calling the power. Deep in earth's heart, the sons of Amenti heard, and hearing, directed the changing of the flower of fire that burns eternally, changing and shifting, using the Logos, until that great fire changed its direction. Over the world then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing Earth's balance until only the Temple of Light was left standing on the great mountain on Undal, still rising out of the water. Some there were who were living, saved from the rush of the fountains. Called to me then the Master, saying, Gather ye together my people, take them by the arts ye have learned of far across the waters, until ye reach the land of the hairy barbarians, dwelling in the caves of the desert. Follow there the plan that ye know of. Gathered I then my people, and entered the great ship of the Master. Upward we rose into the morning. Dark beneath us lay the temple. Suddenly over it rose the waters, vanished from earth, until the time appointed was the great temple. Fast we fled towards the sun of the morning, until beneath us lay the land of the children of Chem. Raging, they came with cudgels and spears, lifted in anger, seeking to slay and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. Then raised I my staff, and directed a ray of vibration, striking them still in their tracks as fragments of stone of the mountain. Then spoke I to them in words calm and peaceful, telling them of the might of Atlantis, saying we were children of the sun and its messengers. Cowed I them by my display of magic science, until at my feet they grovelled when I released them. Long dwelt we in the land of Chem, long and yet long again, until obeying the commands of the Master, who while sleeping yet lives eternally, I sent from me the sons of Atlantis, sent them in many directions, that from the womb of time wisdom might rise again in her children. Long time I dwelt in the land of Chem, doing great works by the wisdom within me. Upward grew into the light of knowledge the children of Chem, watered by the rains of my wisdom. Blasted I then a path to Amenti, so that I might retain my powers, living from age to age a son of Atlantis, keeping the wisdom, preserving the records. Great grew the sons of Chem, conquering the people around them, growing slowly upwards in soul force. Now for a time I go from among them into the dark halls of Amenti, deep in the halls of the earth, before the lords of the powers, face to face once again with the dweller. Raised I high over the entrance a doorway, a gateway leading down to Amenti. Few there would be with courage to dare it, few past the portal to dark Amenti. Raised over the passage I a mighty pyramid, using the power that overcomes earth force. Deep and yet deeper placed I a force house or chamber. From it carved I a circular passage, reaching almost to the great summit. There in the apex set I the crystal, sending the ray into the time-space, drawing the force from out of the ether, concentrating upon the gateway to Amenti. Other chambers I built and left vacant to all seeming, yet hidden within them are the keys to Amenti. He who in courage would dare the dark realms, let him be purified first by long fasting, lie in the sarcophagus of stone in my chamber, then to reveal I to him the great mysteries. Soon shall he follow to where I shall meet him, even in the darkness of earth shall I meet him. I, Thoth, Lord of Wisdom, meet him and hold him and dwell with him always. Built I the great pyramid, patterned after the pyramid of earth force, burning eternally so that it too might remain through the ages. In it I built my knowledge of magic science, so that it might be here when again I return from Amenti. I, while I sleep in the halls of Amenti, my soul roaming free will incarnate, dwell among men, in this form or another. Emissary on earth am I of the dweller, fulfilling his commands so man might be lifted. Now return I to the halls of Amenti, leaving behind me some of my wisdom. Preserve ye and keep ye the command of the dweller. Lift ever upwards your eyes towards the light. Surely in time ye are one with the Master. Surely by right ye are one with the Master. Surely by right ye are one with the All. Now I depart from ye. Know my commandments, keep them and be them, and I will be with you, helping and guiding you into the light. Now before me opens the portal. Go I down in the darkness of night. Maurice Doreal was the name adopted by Claude Doggins as head of the Brotherhood of the White Temple, an occult brotherhood based in Sedalia, Colorado. The writer was born in Sulphur Springs, Oklahoma. At a young age, he fell in love with Tarzan and soon broadened his interest in fantasy literature and science fiction in general. Since he was a child, his library counted thousands of titles on the subject, and subsequently his curiosity also extended towards the topics of occultism. He claimed to have spent 8 years in Tibet immediately after serving his country in World War I, and also claimed to have visited the occult center of Mount Shasta in Northern California. Doreal founded the Brotherhood of the White Temple in 1930 and devoted much of his life to compiling lessons for the Brotherhood and a series of pamphlets called the Little Temple Library, which ranged across a variety of topics related to the occult, Atlantis and UFOs. His knowledge came, according to what he claimed, from his contacts with the Great White Lodge of Masters, a Masonic lodge of which little information is available, and this lodge was formed by those who, beyond earthly experience, seek to guide humanity in evolution. This is a very surprising fact, because Maurice Doreal produced numerous writings containing stories of UFOs and aliens, and which only later, in the 1960s, would seem to have become part of some science fiction films and stories, as if his mind had borne most of what we know on the subject, and not only, since it also laid the foundations for one of the most famous theories about aliens. He was convinced of the existence of the reptilians. He claimed that they were trying to merge with humans and that they were already operating underground, away from prying eyes. Doreal began work on the Brotherhood's new headquarters in Sedalia in 1946, at the height of fears of possible atomic warfare. The chosen location, a valley protected by 1,500-foot high mountain walls, should have been a safe and secure site in the event of a possible bombardment. 2 years later, he foretold that the biblical Battle of Armageddon would soon begin, and the resident brothers stockpiled food supplies for the troubled times ahead. The man died in 1963. The Brotherhood continues to exist today, and regards Doreal's many writings as authoritative literature. Thoth, as a witness of the reality lived by the Egyptian people, was often represented as secretary and vizier of Ra, god of the sun, and in the underworld, called Duat, he was the helper of Osiris when the need arose to judge the souls of the dead during psychostasis, or the ritual in which the deities assigned a judgment and consequently a destiny to the soul of the deceased. This practice originally comes to us through the documents written in the text of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, better known as the Book of the Dead. Book is the term that comes closest to indicating the entire collection of texts, which is made up of magical religious formulas, containing a considerable amount of material, and which was composed by various Egyptian priests over a millennium. In a 2008 edition, the text that has come down to us reaches 700 pages. The magical practices contained in it were supposed to serve the deceased as protection and help in their journey towards the world of the dead, which was seen as fraught with pitfalls and difficulties in order to achieve immortality. The hieroglyphic representation of the Duat, a star often inscribed in a circle, leads us to hypothesize that at first the underworld was considered positioned in the sky, and only with the codification of the myth of Osiris, called Lord of the Duat, the underworld became a place on earth. The Egyptians believed that the soul was made up of several parts, including the Ka, which remained with the deceased after death, and the Ba, which could have access to the Duat. The Ba is depicted as a blue human head, or as a bird, the black stork, with a human face. His purpose was to allow the deceased to move anywhere and to assume any form they desired. The most famous representation of psychostasis can be admired in the tomb of the noble Hennefer, superintendent of the cattle estates for the funerary cult of Seti I. In the upper part of the works present on the walls of the tomb, the deceased Hennefer beseeches 42 of the judges, 7 of whom bear the Ankh, the symbol of life. In the lower part of the hieroglyphics, Hennefer is led by the hands of Anubis, god of embalming, towards a balance in the Hall of the Two Mart, or Hall of the Two Truths. In a sort of second frame of the episode, Anubis can be seen placing the heart of the deceased on a plate of an enormous scale, represented in turn by the corresponding hieroglyph, a vase. On the other side of the balance, on the second plate, however, there is the feather, or the mart, symbol of balance, order, harmony, truth, law and rule, morality and justice. Mart, sent into the world by her father, the sun god Ra, was often personified as an anthropomorphic goddess, with a feather on her head. She was the goddess of the natural disposition of the constellations, the seasons, human as well as divine justice, as well as propagator of cosmic order versus chaos. The god of wisdom Thoth takes note of the outcome of the weighing. If, in fact, the heart, as the repository of all actions, good or evil, performed during life, balances the feather, then the deceased will be declared Ma'keru, or justified, and admitted to the realm of the dead. Otherwise, the heart of the deceased would have been fed to Amit, or she who swallows the deceased, represented by a monster at the foot of the balance, which is represented in polymorphic form by the most dangerous animals of Egypt, the crocodile, the lion, and the hippopotamus. The penultimate frame depicts Horus presenting Hennefer, ready to be accepted into the realm of the dead, by Osiris, who is enthroned at the extreme right of the painting under a canopy and placed on a sort of raft. Under the raft are many wavy lines representing water or the ocean of primordial waters, the Nun, from which the primordial mound emerges, and which personifies the Isle of Flames, from which, in turn, the Egyptian lotus will arise. From the Egyptian lotus, emblem of rebirth due to its characteristic of closing its corolla by sinking into the water in the evening, and by re-emerging at dawn, opening it and directing it towards the sunlight, in turn the 4 sons of Horus are born. Dwamutef, with a jackal's head, Hapi, monkey-headed, Hamset, with a human head, and Kebeshenuf, with a falcon head, the protectors of the organs removed from the deceased and contained in the canopic jars. The presence of a set of scales connected to the concept of evaluation of truth would justify the fact that this very symbol was then chosen, still today, to indicate the impartiality of justice. During the last half of the 5th century BC, Pharaoh Psammetichus III was defeated in battle by King Cambyses II of Persia. Cambyses II was crowned pharaoh with the royal name of Mesutira, thus initiating the first Persian domination of Egypt. Thus, together with the island of Cyprus and the lands of Phoenicia, Egypt went to form the 6th satrapy, or province of the Persian Empire, called Achaemenid. During the century of Persian domination, Egypt was catapulted into a new reality, which no longer positioned it as a centre of power and independent state, but as a province of a geographically vast and militarily powerful empire, where, however, the figure of the pharaoh persisted, embodied this time by the Persian emperors. They no longer resided along the Nile or in the capital Memphis, but in the Persian cities of Babylonia, Pasargadae, Ecbatana, Susa, and Persepolis. In this long period, society changed by indulging and incorporating the Achaemenid culture. However, religion remained anchored to the ancient creeds, and thus the figure of the god Thoth was also preserved. The Persian domination then ended, with the arrival of a figure who will forever link his fame to that of Egypt, Alexander the Great. His brief stay in the land of the Nile will bring a series of transformations to the country, not least the affirmation of the Ptolemaic pharaonic dynasty of Macedonian origin, which settled in the city of Alexandria, founded by the conqueror himself. He set up Egypt in a complex reality. Alongside the pharaonic model, Hellenism was asserted, which would transform Alexandria into one of the major cultural centers of the Mediterranean. The Greeks were stunned by such a complex civilization, which demonstrated its level of development through art, architecture, and knowledge. Thus, a fascination was born in Greek thinkers, which over time led to the assimilation of some cultural and, in particular, religious aspects. Thus, Thoth became Hermes, also called Hermes Trismegistus. For the Greeks, Hermes was the son of Zeus and the Pleiad Maya. He was considered the divine messenger, as well as holding the positions of god of trade, travel, borders, thieves, eloquence, and athletic disciplines. And just like his Egyptian counterpart, he also acts as psychopomp, or he who escorts the souls of the deceased to Hades. The classic iconography of Hermes obviously differs from that of Thoth. He was represented with the appearance of a handsome young man, carrying a pouch, wearing winged sandals and hat, and carrying the messenger staff called caduceus, while his symbols were the rooster and the tortoise. Both Hermes and Thoth are at the service of a superior divinity. Hermes is the messenger of Zeus. Thoth is the scribe of Ra and Osiris. Hermes is god of speech, and Thoth is god of speech. Both are psychopomps, companions of the souls of the deceased to the underworld, the gods of writing and magic. Following such a process of assimilation between Greek and Egyptian divinities, which took place in the syncretistic atmosphere of the Roman Empire, Hermes Trismegistus became the god who revealed the truth and mediated between men and the gods. Hermes Trismegistus literally means Hermes the 3 times great, probably due to the Egyptian custom of iterating the adjective great before the name of the deities. Hermes was therefore precisely referred to as Trismegistus, the 3 times great. A set of initiatory and philosophical writings were attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, collected later also in the Byzantine era in the Corpus Hermeticum, part of which were also found among the codes of Nag Hammadi, named after the city in which they were found. The writings contained in the codes are mostly Christian Gnostic writings, but they also include 3 works belonging to the Corpus Hermeticum and a passage from Plato's Republic. Scholars believe that these codes belong to the library of the Cenobite monastery, and that the monks had temporarily hidden them to save them from destruction, after, in 367, Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria had sent a letter to all the churches of Egypt with the order to consider only the 27 books of the New Testament as canonical, while all the others were forbidden because they were heretical. Collectively, Hermetic literature is a category of papyri containing spells and initiation procedures. In the dialogue of Asclepius, which is part of the Corpus Hermeticum, the art of telestike is described, that is, recalling or imprisoning angels or demons inside statues with the help of herbs, gems, and perfumes. The methods for making these figures speak and prophesize are also described. In other papyri, there are formulas for constructing artifacts and animating them. Furthermore, Hermetic texts are usually divided into 2 categories: philosophical and technical. The text of the Corpus Hermeticum ends with the Lament of Asclepius, which denounces the abandonment of the Egyptian religion, because its spiritual meaning has been lost, and reads as follows. Do you not know, Asclepius, that Egypt is an image of heaven, or, to speak more exactly, in Egypt all the operations of the powers which rule and work in heaven have been transferred to earth below? Nay, it should rather be said that the whole cosmos dwells in this our land as in its sanctuary. And yet, since it is fitting that wise men should have knowledge of all events before they come to pass, you must not be left in ignorance of this. There will come a time when it will be seen that in vain have the Egyptians honoured the deity with heartfelt piety and assiduous service, and all our holy worship will be found bootless and ineffectual. For the gods will return from earth to heaven. Egypt will be forsaken, and the land which was once the home of religion will be left desolate, bereft of the presence of its deities. O Egypt, Egypt, of thy religion nothing will remain but an empty tale, which thine own children in time to come will not believe. Nothing will be left but graven words, and only the stones will tell of thy piety. And in that day men will be weary of life, and they will cease to think the universe worthy of reverent wonder and of worship. And so religion, the greatest of all blessings, for there is nothing, nor has been, nor shall ever be, that can be deemed a greater boon, will be threatened with destruction. Men will think it a burden, and will come to scorn it. They will no longer love this world around us, this incomparable work of God, this glorious structure which He has built, this sum of good made up of things of many diverse forms, this instrument whereby the will of God operates in that which He has made, ungrudgingly favouring man's welfare, this combination and accumulation of all the manifold things that can call forth the veneration, praise, and love of the beholder. Darkness will be preferred to light, and death will be thought more profitable than life. No one will raise his eyes to heaven. The pious will be deemed insane, and the impious wise. The madman will be thought a brave man, and the wicked will be esteemed as good. As to the soul, and the belief that it is immortal by nature, or may hope to attain to immortality, as I have taught you, all this they will mock at, and will even persuade themselves that it is false. No word of reverence or piety, no utterance worthy of heaven and of the gods of heaven will be heard or believed. And so the gods will depart from mankind, a grievous thing, and only evil angels will remain, who will mingle with men and drive the poor wretches by main force into all manner of reckless crime, into wars and robberies and frauds and all things hostile to the nature of the soul. Then will the earth no longer stand unshaken, and the sea will bear no ships. Heaven will not support the stars in their orbits, nor will the stars pursue their constant course in heaven. All voices of the gods will of necessity be silenced and dumb. The fruits of the earth will rot, the soil will turn barren, and the very air will sicken in sullen stagnation. After this manner will old age come upon the world. Religion will be no more. All things will be disordered and awry. All good will disappear. But when all this has befallen, Asclepius, then the Master and Father, God, the first before all, the maker of that God who first came into being, will look on that which has come to pass, and will stay the disorder by the counterworking of his will, which is the good. He will call back to the right path those who have gone astray. He will cleanse the world from evil, now washing it away with water, floods, now burning it out with fiercest fire, or again expelling it by war and pestilence. And thus he will bring back his world to its former aspect, so that the cosmos will once more be deemed worthy of worship and wondering reverence, and God, the maker and restorer of the mighty fabric, will be adored by the men of that day with unceasing hymns of praise and blessing. Such is the new birth of the cosmos. It is a making again of all things good, a holy and awe-striking restoration of all nature, and it is wrought in the process of time by the eternal will of God. For God's will has no beginning, it is ever the same, and as it is now, even so it has ever been, without beginning, for it is the very being of God to purpose good. Hermetic writings remained a precious source of knowledge even during the period of Roman dominance in the Mediterranean. However, following the advent of Christianity and its conversion to the state religion desired by Emperor Constantine, the Hermetic Code was banned as it represented a work containing religious ideas of pagan origin. Following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, there was almost 1,000 years in which in Western Europe the traces of the code were apparently lost, while in Constantinople and in the Middle East there was still research on these sacred writings, which philosophers also called the Book of Thoth. It was only during the 15th century, when scholars and philosophers in Italy came into contact with ancient works from Constantinople, which had just fallen into the hands of the Ottomans, that an interest in ancient culture was kindled for the first time. Thus began the Renaissance. In 1453, during a trip to Macedonia via Constantinople, the Italian monk Leonardo da Pistoia discovered 14 original books, belonging to Michael Psellos, of a work dating back to the 11th century, written in Greek for Hermes Trismegisto, and entitled Hermetica, and later known as the Corpus Hermeticum. Returning to Florence, the monk Leonardo gave the Corpus Hermeticum to Cosimo de' Medici, who, no later than 1463, commissioned Marsilio Ficino to translate it from Greek into Latin. The Corpus Hermeticum subsequently represented the source of inspiration for Renaissance, Hermetic, and Neoplatonic thought. But the journey of these writings to reach us was arduous. Indeed, the work of the Corpus Hermeticum would in turn appear to derive from the Hermetica, a vast collection of works containing translations of a multitude of Middle Eastern and Latin texts, which can vary widely in content and scope, although they are usually divided into two main categories: the technical Hermetica and the religious philosophical one. The technical category of Hermetica includes a wide variety of treatises on astrology, medicine and pharmacology, alchemy and magic, the oldest of which were written in Greek and may date as far back as the 2nd or 3rd century BC. Many of the writings belonging to this category were subsequently translated into Arabic and Latin, often extensively revised and expanded over the centuries. Others were originally written in Arabic, and in some cases the first original copy has been lost. The writings were also widely copied during the Middle Ages. Of these writings of the Hermetica, the Emerald Tablets is the best known. The text that became popular among 19th and 20th century occultists and esoterics gave rise to the expression, "as above, so below." Here too, the author is identified as Hermes Trismegistus, and like most of the other works attributed to him, it is very difficult to date precisely. The earliest known source of the Emerald Tablets text is the Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, also known as the Book of Causes, an encyclopedic work on natural philosophy falsely attributed to Apollonius of Tyana. This book was compiled in Arabic in the late 8th or early 9th century, but was most likely based on much older Greek and/or Syriac sources. The Emerald Tablets was also translated into Latin in the 12th century by Ugo di Sant'Alla as part of his translation of the Book of Causes, and again retranslated into Latin and inserted into the 13th century translation of the Secretum Secretorum, also deriving from an ancient Arab work. However, the Latin translation of the Emerald Tablets, which formed the main basis for all subsequent versions, was originally part of an anonymous collection of alchemical commentaries, which was also called Liber Hermetis de Alchimia. In the narrative frame of the Book of Causes, Balinus, or Apollonius of Tyana, tells his readers that he discovered the text in a vault under a statue of Hermes in Tyana, and that, inside the vault, he found an old corpse placed on a golden throne, holding the emerald tablets in its hands. Part of the text of the Book of Causes, translated from Arabic, states, "Undoubtedly true, the top is from below, and the bottom is from above. He worked miracles from one, as all things were from one arrangement, one by one. His father is the sun, his mother is the moon. The wind carried him in her womb, the earth nourished him. Abu Talisman, treasurer of wonders, full of powers. Fire has become earth. It separates earth from up and down. As he has the light of lights, so darkness escapes him. Power of powers. He goes beyond all that is kind. He enters all that is coarse. On the formation of the larger world, the work was formed. This is my honor, and for this reason I have called Hermes the Triangle of Wisdom." The Emerald Tablets, translated into Latin by Ugo Santalla, states, "It is true without falsehood, certain and very true, that what is below is like what is above, and what is above is like what is below, to perform the miracle of the unique thing. And as all things are and come from one, through the mediation of one, so all things are born from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is his father, the moon is his mother, the wind carried him in her womb, the earth is his nurse. The father of all, the end of all the world is here. His strength or power is whole if it is converted into earth. You will separate the earth from the fire, the thin from the thick, gently and with great ingenuity. It ascends from earth to heaven, and again descends to earth and receives the force of superior and inferior things. By this means you will have the glory of the whole world, and by this means darkness will flee from you. This is the strong fortress of all strength, for it will overcome every subtle thing and penetrate every solid thing. Thus the world was created. Out of this will come wonderful adaptations, the method of which is here. It is therefore that I have been called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. Complete is what I said of the operation of the sun. In the centuries to come, however, generated by the knowledge of the Hermetic Code, the legend was created in esoteric circles concerning a series of much older books, which would preserve within their pages the entire knowledge of the world. They would have been written by the god Thoth himself. The Book of Thoth, 42 volumes that would have been written and left on earth by the Egyptian god, and in which the mysteries of the heavens, predictions of events, would be found. These prophetic books are allegedly hidden in secret Egyptian libraries, and are now missing. The Egyptians kept many texts on a wide range of subjects in the houses of life, the libraries contained within the temple complexes. Since Thoth was a god of knowledge, many of these texts were believed to be his work. A famous Egyptian historian even claimed that Thoth wrote about 36,525 books during his lifetime. The father of the church, Clement of Alexandria, part of the homonymous group of ancient Christian theologians and writers who laid the intellectual and doctrinal foundations of Christianity from the 1st to the 8th century AD, in the 6th book of his work Stromata, mentions these 42 books, used by custodians of Egyptian temples, and which according to him would contain the entire Egyptian philosophy. All these books, according to Clement, were written by Hermes. However, looking at the translation from the Egyptian language and concepts up to Greek language and concepts, it would seem that part of the Egyptian authenticity was lost. The imagery of the mythical book of Thoth is also part of an ancient Egyptian tale from the Ptolemaic period, known as Setne Kamwas and Nanifakapta, or Setne I. The book, written by Thoth, would contain 2 spells, one of which allows the reader to understand the language of animals, and one which allows the reader to perceive the gods themselves. According to the story, the book was originally hidden at the bottom of the Nile, near Koptos, where it was found locked inside a series of boxes guarded by snakes. The Egyptian prince Neferkapta fought the snakes and recovered the book, but as a punishment for stealing it, the gods killed his wife Arwere and son Merab. Neferkapta committed suicide and was buried along with the book. Generations later, the story's protagonist, Setne Kamwas, a character based on the historical prince Kayamwazet, the 4th son of Ramses I, stole the book from Neferkapta's tomb, despite the opposition of Neferkapta's ghost. Setne then meets a beautiful woman who seduces him into killing his own children and humiliating himself before the pharaoh. The prince later discovers that this episode was an illusion created by the spirit Neferkapta, and fearing further retaliation, returned the book to the grave. At the request of the wandering spirit, Setne also found the bodies of Neferkapta's wife and son, and burying them together with the body of the late prince, he sealed the tomb forever. This ancient story would reflect the Egyptian belief that the knowledge of the gods is not intended for human beings. The mysteries are immense like the secrets of heaven, and only time can remain their guardian. However, these ancient ancestors of ours probably knew much more than we can only imagine today. An example are the pyramids of Giza, the effective demonstration that these ancestors already knew pi, a fact also ascertained through the mathematical writing of the Rind papyrus around 1700 BC. Or the Dendera lamps, bas-reliefs that were partially lost in the 70s and on which strange devices resembling ancient incandescent lamps or very powerful weapons were depicted. They were probably also connected to an artifact from another area, also stolen in 2003 during the invasion of Iraq. The Baghdad battery from Persia, dated 247 BC to 224 AD. An ancient vase in which a rudimentary battery was placed and sealed with what we nowadays call asphalt, a compound of bitumen and sand. Batteries that once, why not, could have very well been exploited, as well as for the study of the transmutation of base metals, that is, low cost, such as lead, into gold, but also as generators of low voltage electricity for the extraction of oxygen and hydrogen from water. That is, the process that since the 1800s we have called electrolysis. But if these ancestors built things like this, knowing their effects, how much of their knowledge could have been stolen? After all, religion is only one of the many nuances from which we have most likely drawn knowledge, and only a tiny fragment of the knowledge that the Neteru possessed. Alien gods.